Evening, everybody, and welcome to the January CCOB meeting of the Board Curriculum Committee. So I am going to be speaking a little fast. That is because we are taking a new schedule opportunity on here. That is a weird way to say that, but it's a thing that I said. We are now going to have a hard stop for this meeting at 7:20, which means we are 80 minutes. We are going to get to everything on our agenda because we have to. What it means is we're going to have to be really concise in both our questions and our answers, both from the board and the committee. I will be stopping us, everyone, at 3 minutes a person. So really try and prioritize what's important so that we can still have time to get to our community questions. Tonight, we have two things on the agenda. One, we have a personal finance course that we're gonna hear about being added to the, we already have a personal finance course, but the requirement is what we're gonna be talking about because that's a new addition from the state level to be added for the graduation requirements. And then we're going to talk about our state assessment data, and this is a really, really robust presentation that we've been through. I feel like a lot of the questions that often get asked by this group have been addressed, so I'm really excited for everybody to hear that. So without further ado, Mr. Weinstein.
Please explain the double commenting, the time that people have for make comments, and at the beginning of for agenda items and then non-agenda items.
Okay, ostensibly we have time after each individual presentation to hear comments specifically on the presentation you had so that we can get to all the agenda items. Tonight, because we are super packed, I do not imagine we will have a whole lot of additional time available for comments or questions that are appropriate to this committee, but not to this specific agenda. Any questions that are added into the chat feature will be saved and distributed to the full board, and any comments or questions that you don't have a chance to have answered today and you want to follow up on, you can go ahead and email communitycomments@lmsd.org, and if you would write CCOB and today's date in the subject line, and that'll help us consolidate all that, and Mr. Weinstein will be able to get back to everyone on that. And without further ado, personal finance, please and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kalish, for the efficient opening and explaining what we're going to be doing tonight. I will be presenting personal finance on behalf of multiple departments, as you'll see in a moment, and then we will do our state assessment data that we do annually. Personal finance is as you mentioned, is a course that we've offered through our family and consumer science classes at the high school level. The 26-27 school year will be the first time that the state of Pennsylvania requires that course for graduation. Pennsylvania is not unique to that. We are now around the 30th state that has this requirement in the union. I will go over our proposals, what we're thinking about this course, and share them with you now. And here's the agenda that I'll be speaking to you about. Starting with Act 35, which is the mandate that I just spoke to, where all school entities and non-public schools must provide a mandatory half credit or more personal finance course. Student completion will be required to complete the course while in high school. So this will have impact on our graduation requirements, and as Ms. Schaefer and I have been working closely together, sometimes you'll see curriculum coincide nicely with where we are in policy. A curriculum overview, as you can see really briefly, the big areas that will be covered, the fundamentals of personal finance, income, spending, saving and investing, risk and insurance, and credit. Every time I discuss this with adults, they all say, I wish I had that course. So I know what the state's logic was. And you can see here, this is the big topics. These are standards. If you're interested, I linked in the presentation, which will be on board docs, the state standards for them. So if you thought, this is really interesting, what are students going to learn about this? You can click on that link there. It's hyperlinked. It'll take you to the state standards that we aspire to align to. Who can teach it? The state designated these areas. The ones that you're most familiar with in the courses that we have are math, social studies, family and consumer science, and business. In the last year, I've sent out a survey to roughly 50 high schools in the area. It's been a collection of a lot of different ways that schools are meeting that mandate. There have been schools in our area that have already had this as a requirement. Schools that haven't now have to add that as we are now. Many of them have done it different ways, probably most frequently through the business department. We are considering our graduation requirements, staffing, which will be something that we'll have to interact and deal with, that we want to do efficiently, which you'll see more on, our scheduling, and then how that interacts with the current personal finance elective. Here are our current graduation requirements, as you would see in our program planning guide. This would look a little bit different in policy, but it's the same messaging. We require all of our graduates to have 21.5 credits. Most of them have more than that, significantly more. Each year you have to carry 5.25 credits. If you did the math on these would not equal 21.5, the numbers that you see there, so it allows room for electives. We don't plan on raising our graduation requirement, except for the inclusion of including 0.5 of personal finance as one of the courses that you'll have to take before you graduate. The recommendations are as follows. Add 0.5 personal finance. We hope you approve that. If you don't, the state will have a problem with you. And we hope, this is something that's another change that I want to represent transparently to you. To do this efficiently and working with our schedulers and our scheduling consultant, we do ask to move the health requirement from 0.67 to 0.50. We are already thinking with our curriculum supervisor in that area, how do we effectively essentialize the curriculum and make sure students aren't missing anything. But that is something, currently our health class runs 2 out of every 4 days of a cycle. A standard class runs 3 out of 4 days in a cycle. Health is an outlier in that way, so it doesn't play nicely with the master schedule. We think this increases scheduling efficiencies tremendously, and if we add another mandated elective, they would bump nicely into each other for semester 1 and semester 2, which is the current plan of how we would offer them. So that's why that change is recommended. We also recommend to align the personal finance course that we already offer to the state standards. We did a crosswalk. They're pretty similar. It will require some revisions that we commit to make. We also would like to utilize other departments to teach the course. This is for efficiency and thinking about staffing. If we said family and consumer science, you were the only ones to teach that, it would wipe out all the electives in family and consumer science. If we did that to business, similarly, it would wipe out their electives. We don't want to do that, so we're going to ask each of our high schools to maximize the schedule and availability and co-create the curriculum. We also want to add a summer school course in personal finance. As you know, many of our students have an outline and a blueprint of all the courses they want to maximize their transcript. And so we do want to offer that opportunity to do over the summer as early as this summer. As you know, we did that with health. We first did that with MVP, which we plan to do with personal finance. And we get feedback on it and a feel for it, we can think about adopting it ourselves as we did with health. Just to give you scope of the current courses, in the past 5 years, these are the courses that we offered at each high school in 21, 22 to 23, 24, 1 class per each. 24, 25, Lower Moraine had an additional section. So this is going to scale. What we're hoping to do strategically is have 9th graders be able to take this right away to offset the burden that will be in 10th grade, allow people to take it in the summer. That's a variable that we don't know. We anticipate students doing that to open their schedule, especially students that plan on going to an IB program, and then seeing how many sophomores need it, and then offering that health and personal finance probably to the majority of our students in that 10th grade year. That's our plan. If we have students take it in 9th grade now and through the summer, that will offset the number of students that need to take that. That's our thought process currently. The next steps would be to revise the program of studies, school board approval this January meeting, update the graduation policies to coincide with what the state's mandating, a minor course revision for existing personal finance course, and then we hope to, later in the month, start communicating this to 8th grade and give them options of how they can meet that requirement as early as 9th grade, and majority of them probably in 10th grade. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very thorough. I don't assume that we'll have any questions from the board. If we do have anything, unless it is exceptionally pressing, I would ask that we please save those for a discussion in policy just to save time. But do we have, from my 4 actual committee members, do we feel good moving this forward for consideration for the full board?
I just have one quick question.
Make it quick.
Just one quick clarifying question. Is health, will it still be 2 days out of the 4-day rotation, just the number of credits?
Oh, that's a really good question
will go down?
that I didn't cover. No, it will not. It will be 3 out of 4.
Okay.
Instead of 2 out of 4 for a full calendar year, it will be 3 out of 4 for a semester.
Okay, thanks.
Just clarify for the public for me, who are your 4 members of this
Oh, yes, I will make that very clear also. So this year's curriculum committee of the board, Jen and myself are our co-chairs, and we have Sarah and Abby, which are our other members of this community, and the rest of our friendly faces up here, except for Dr. Ranelli, are members of the board that are on other committees. And just not this one. Make it really fast.
I appreciate this so much. This is such a great change or addition. Can you clarify what MVP is just for the general community? Because you said that they offer health. And they would be
MVP is we have a partnership with where they offer us some summer options in some areas. Primarily, it's been some makeup classes that they offer through us that we partner with them. We've also had them have health. We eventually took that over with our own teachers. This past summer was the first time we did that. MVP does meet this requirement. We cross-checked that with one of our curriculum supervisors and the curriculum, and we felt like it was worthy to partner with them.
And it's part of the Montgomery County Intermediate Union?
Yes.
Okay. All right, fantastic. So we're going to go right on into our state assessment data presentation, and Scott, take it away.
Okay. Good evening. So the state assessment data presentation, I will be joined by each of our curriculum supervisors to present the area that they supervise most directly. In doing a presentation like this, there are so many data points. What we try to do is tell a story that's accurate based on feedback that we've had in the past that shares a story of how we've done as a district. There are multiple data points. Throughout this presentation, you will see some slides that are very busy. Busy meaning there's going to be a lot of data points and numbers on them. We will likely not go through all of them, knowing that this presentation will go in board docs. We will highlight some areas based on feedback and what we think people are interested in, and areas that we don't cover, that will be where the questions come in. We spent a lot of time together reviewing this, putting this together to share a snapshot. And balance, I don't think we'll ever stand here and say we have education figured out. We have 100% advanced in all categories. Nobody has ever done that. That is our goal. We'd like to do that. I hope this comes off with humility and also sharing that we've had some successes, that when I speak and share our data, it's on behalf of a lot of our students, staff, and our families and students. So I also would be remiss if I didn't share some of those highlights. So I hope I strike that balance well. That's the intent that I'm trying to do, with understanding we have room for growth, and we will every year. And starting with an area that I think is comparison data, we don't always just necessarily look at how did we do against the state. That's not always our bar, but I think it's important to do. We are in the top 1% in all districts in the state. I'll show you that a little bit more clearly. And we're ranked number 1 in every category in the county. What does that look like? In the state, there are 499 school districts. So in ELA, in terms of achievement, we were the 5th ranked. That fluctuates. In math, we were number 3. In recent years, we were 1 in that area. And then sometimes we're below 3. In science, we were number 7. In the county of 21 school districts, we were ranked 1st in those areas in terms of achievement. One of the things that I want to show you that, one of the questions that would be natural is when you see areas that the data isn't where we would like it to be, what will you do about this? All of our curriculum supervisors will share these answers. I'm going to say it for all of them, and then they'll share specifically what that data tells them specifically, for example, in middle school ELA, what are we looking at? But all of them will have these systems. These are the systems I presented to you in September that we are trying to continue to utilize and build capacity in. One is Universal Design for Learning. The last time we met in November, we presented specifically on that. The other is professional learning communities. That's when we get teachers together to look at data in real time and make adjustments for intervention and enrichment. I want to pause on that for a second and slow my voice down to bring you back in. The data that I'm going to show you today is a snapshot that happens at a singular point of time during the school year. We can't intervene on that data in real time because we don't get those results till the summer. That would not make for a good system for waiting for a couple months. I hope we did well, and then intervene. We take data points throughout the year. What PLCs do is teachers that teach the same content, they teach, they assess, they look at assessment results and intervene in real time. This, however, what we're presenting tonight is high stakes. This is what we compare against the states. This is what shows up in the paper, what people see, and is available on the internet to all. So we recognize that they are high stakes, we present them as such. And the last one are multiple tiers of systems of support. With our resources that we have in the district, how do we utilize them? How do we make sure we're using the right resources to the right students? And this certainly helps us with that, along with the real-time data. I share this slide for something that I think is interesting that you want to know. In 24-25, the state gave all districts the option to take the assessment on laptop or pencil and paper, traditional like we did when we were younger and we took standardized tests. 9 of our 11 schools transitioned to the laptop, 2 did not. 2 stayed. This year they will be forced, as all students are, to take it online, except if they have a designated special need that allows them to take it outside of the laptop. All other students will take this online. As we presented, we talked a little bit about technology in the past. We don't want that to be our first experience with a laptop. So we do minimize technology in an elementary setting, but we don't eliminate it by any means because we know students are going to need it and the state's asking them to do so. This is something that we do every year just so you can kind of understand the rest of the presentation. Kind of a snapshot of like, this is what we're going to be talking about and this is what it means. Proficiency means the state sets a bar for each of their assessments. This score allows you to be proficient. What the state deems as you understood enough of the standards and were able to show your learning in a way that deems that proficient. The 4 other areas are below basic, proficient, and advanced is the way they share. That's proficiency. The next one is predictive growth. The state uses a system called PVAS. It stands for the Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System. That one shows growth. So we already know that a lot of students, they're going to be proficient when they take the test. In some cases, unfortunately, the state will say, based on their data and a lot of data points, this student may have a 5% chance of being proficient on the statewide assessment. We don't like seeing that, but if we simply gave you a data point and says they were proficient or not proficient, it would probably be incomplete. So we want to show you how that student has grown, where they are, and where students have grown. Our goal, again, is all students achieve proficiency, but that's why that second metric is there. We use them in conjunction with each other to share a story. When looked at together, it helps us better understand student performance, both achievement and growth. The growth, to add a little bit of complexity, shares 5 categories, as you see in those colors below. So it is a little bit confusing. Ask us questions at the end if you say, what does that mean? But you can see the different color systems that the state uses. One, again, based on achievement and proficiency. The other one, growth, what a student did compared to what the state projected them to do. Another definition, historically underperforming. We will share historically underperforming data. You may say, what does that mean? Who is that? There are 3 distinct categories. Lower Merion does not choose them, the state does. They're economically disadvantaged. There are ELL students, meaning students receiving support for English language acquisition, and there are students with disabilities, students that have an IEP. They are the state-designated historically underperforming categories. We will highlight that and single out economically disadvantaged students as well as Black students. It's something we report on every year, and we know there's questions about that and things that we've presented in the past. So we will highlight that today. I want to let you know why and what the categories are. Here's what we would see. These are samples. When we get reports from eMetric, typically the data that we use frequently, we will see a score report. How many students tested, how they did, what percentage of them are in each of the categories, and how many are above proficiency. That's what it will look like. That will give us a broad snapshot. We also get disaggregated data. You will see some of that tonight. How we use this data to compare gender, ethnicity, and other areas as you see listed there. So we disaggregate the data. We also look at standard performance. What does that show us? Is there a particular area in one of our subject areas that we're not performing really well as a system? That will let teachers, curriculum supervisors, building administrators know, hey, that's an area we need to do better on. Where are we doing really well? And then lastly, item performance for individual students. So the system might be doing really well, but someone's child, one of our students is not in a certain area. That's data that lets us work individually with students. So they're big reporting areas that we're able to look through. Let me start with PSSA. PSSA will be the first set of data points that we look through. You'll hear from each of our supervisors. I will come back, we will transition to Keystones. Here's the difference. PSSA assessments are grades 3 through 8. Keystones are primarily high school, 9 through 12, with the exception of students that take integrated 2 in middle school. Those students assess at what we call the winter wave, in the winter season of Keystone testing, which just passed. That's where they will take the assessment, whenever you take integrated 2. Some of our students take that in middle school. So that's the format that we'll be sharing with you, PSSA first, then Keystone. Broad overview. You will see in ELA over the last 3 years, as a district, we had a little dip. That coincides with state data. So still doing really well comparatively, still doing, as you saw, against the state, against the county, and that trends with what the rest of the state is doing. In math, we've seen increase over the last couple years. We're happy to see an increase, also trends with the state data. So we're seeing what the state is seeing in those areas. What are the variables? Can it be that students are taking it online? Maybe. We don't know. There are many variables to how a student performs in an assessment. Can that be one that moves an entire system or a state? Possibly. That's a new shift. Overall, our performances remain pretty consistent. We exceed the state by around 40 percentage points, both areas. The science standards were not reported because of the major change in standards that we have experienced as a state this past year. I will at this point turn this over to Rob Schwartz, who will go specifically into math PSSAs.
Good evening, everyone. Rob Schwartz, K-12 Supervisor Mathematics. Thanks for having me this evening. Typically when we begin a review of our performance in mathematical performance data, I start with this report that comes out of eMetric. This provides a holistic view of our data, both for all students and for our various subgroups. And while I want to celebrate the 80% of our students who reach proficiency and the 50% of students who score advanced, this report does point to various subgroups who are not having the same levels of success and require closer inspection, both of past performance and their growth over the past year. Just to make sure that they're on the right path. And I am really pleased to say that, that I think that we are. As I look at historical data, this is performance data since compared with 2021, and I'm really glad to see that our Black students, Hispanic students, economically disadvantaged, and those receiving special education services have rebounded really well since the COVID-19 pandemic, that we can see from 2021 to 2025, each of those subgroups have grown as much as 21 percentage points, which is a really nice, comeback from where we were, 4 years ago. As far as growth data is concerned, I'm really excited to see that our Black students, that at every grade level, 4th through 8th grade, we have either met or exceeded their projected score, meaning, collectively, based on a calculation that the state does, this is what they're expected or projected to score, that we can see that, especially in grades 6th through 8th grade, that our Black students have exceeded what they were expected to score, which means we're getting closer to proficiency if we're not quite there yet. And the same is true for our economically disadvantaged students, where again, in all grade levels, we have met their expected score, and in many cases, well above what they were projected to score on that mathematical calculation. Ultimately, the data presents a lot of strength in terms of growth and achievement, but it does identify systems for, that need to be reviewed. Systems for remediation and intervention that need to be revised, professional development that need to be targeted both in terms of specific areas of content and attitudes towards mathematics, and an evaluation of our new Tier 1 core curriculum. We're in the middle of 2 pilots right now as we choose a program that we'll take to scale next year, one that will help us ultimately not just improve each of those subgroups, but the goal moving from 80% proficiency to 100%, that's always the goal. So to talk about ELA, I'm going to pass it over to Drew and Dr. Townsend.
Good evening. Thank you for having us this evening. Dory Martin-Patone.
Drew Gingrich.
We are a humanities team for Lower Merion School District. As you can see, we are excited to be able to say that across the years, we have strong ELA performance that I know in past presentations, we have said we consistently perform well, and that's a good thing. While we consistently continue to perform well, we are also, as Rob mentioned, looking to where can we improve upon what we were already doing. So this is just a highlight of the strength and consistency in that performance across the grade levels. Overall, when you look at this data, you can see that the evidence for the previous slide. One of the areas that we looked at in the K2 early literacy area, while that is not assessed grades, it has a major impact on what you see when they go up into the state assessment. Our implementation of a structured literacy program and the professional learning in science of reading has made an impact as that work, because this is the third year of that work, goes into the tested grades. The implementation of common assessments and utilization of item analysis, that's that tier 1, that real-time data you heard Scott speak to, you heard Rob speak to in tier 1, enables us to take not just this data, but the data we see every day to inform our instructional practices and provide intervention to our students. 2 areas of opportunity Drew's going to go into a little more deeply are the key ideas and details, inferential questioning, and text-dependent analysis. These are the 2 areas when we looked at this data and the performance, what were the standards that are related to the questioning and the learning happening in our classrooms. Again, in K through 4, 3 and 4 are tested grades. 4th starts the text-dependent analysis process. Even in kindergarten, we are teaching students how to analyze using pictures as text. So we're getting to think that way and speaking the language well before the state assessment. So we are humbly happy to see that those efforts are coming to fruition as they move on into the grades.
So the 2 areas that Dr. Martin-Patone shared that we are working on would be the key ideas and details, which are those inferential questions, and the text-dependent analysis. These are the 2 areas in ELA that are most frequently, they're the most frequently challenging areas for students, right? It's when we're going from that idea of really expanding upon the critical thinking that's aligned to reading. So we're doing a couple of things, and you can see this in the last 2 bullet points that we want to address. 1, what are the instructional practices we have around the text-dependent analysis writing process? Looking at how do we make sure that progression is moving forward as we build from what's established in the elementary grades, and how do we look at those iterations as we move from when this formally begins to 4th grade, or 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. How do we look for those incremental changes that help students recognize in a tangible way what are the next steps? How does this learning progress? The second piece is something that we hopefully do every year, and it's this idea of looking back at our materials and saying, what are the standards we're prioritizing in our curriculum? Are those prioritized standards matching the standard area where we see students have an opportunity to perform better? And how do we maybe take an opportunity to look at the resources we have and to really make sure students have opportunities at various tiers of instruction to address those standards in the content area that's identified in our curriculum? So following the same framework that Rob had started, you can see our Black student performance. You have 2 data points up there. 1 is growth, the other is achievement. We hold both of these data points in conversation when we look at our Black student performance. Number 1, 4th through 8th grade, we do see students performing at or above the grade level growth measures that are identified by the state. That's where we want to see our students performing, right? And the vast majority of them performing above those expectations. This tells us that the interventions and supports and the monitoring progress that we do, both at the elementary level and the middle school level, are successful. A big piece that you'll hear us talk about is, number 1, looking at horizontal alignment. This is 6th grade or 7th grade, 8th grade across buildings. How are we making sure as a district-wide team we have alignment that's identifying the standards that we need, and we're measuring both informally and formally with our assessments. The second piece of that is looking vertically. How are we making sure students have the opportunity to build, and we're really making sure the experience is enriching? So, as you can see, that fifth grade block there, it's an opportunity as it is every year to reflect as a group and say, are there opportunities we have to really deepen learning in a meaningful way that's addressing the standards that we know have been challenging for students? And are we able to measure that and track that data and support students across the school year?
Thank you. In a similar fashion, we always look at our data collectively, as we did in the first slide, and then our subgroups to look at academic achievement and growth, and to notice those increases and changes and look to root cause. So for the economically disadvantaged student performance, in both fourth and sixth grade, you can see they're well above the growth area, and they're above in fifth, where they're meeting this in seventh and eighth grade. The achievement is at 58.3. So we start to think, what does this tell us, this snapshot in time, in terms of this group? So Drew spoke to that instructional coherence and alignment through the curriculum and common assessments, and that is making an impact as they move up into the grade levels. We also took a look at both our informal and formal data and talked about how can we use the intervention and enrichment periods of time to be more targeted for those students that we know we are seeing that we would like to see more growth and achievement. We have tightened our utilization of intervention resources in Tier 1 and 2, at times using the same resource in a different way, depending upon those common assessments, both formative and summative. The system for sharing this data is becoming more accessible with Linkit, and also using this data to track progress of specific subgroups and having those conversations with all stakeholders throughout the organization. Excuse me. The action plan. So for the past 3 years, we have brought in the structured literacy implementation, which is foundations. We use that K through 2. We have word work built into our curriculum in grades 3 and 4. We have Words Their Way. We have Haggerty in K and 1 for the other components in phonemic awareness. We have truly invested a great amount of time having our teachers invested in this work and having a deep understanding of why it matters. And that has been part of the work. At the same time, we're nurturing comprehension and ensuring that not only are we teaching them how to read, we want them to be able to read to learn. That goes into refining our Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports. We always use the data in all areas of language arts. It's not just the encoding, decoding areas. So we use that in tandem in Tier 1 and Tier 2 to, for instance, do they need just a reteach, a double dose, or is it a totally more significant intervention? So we're able to be responsive in real time by following our Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports in the data. And I'll turn that over to Drew.
As you can see, and we talked about earlier, a key focus will be the text-dependent analysis portion. One is looking at our curriculum, both that horizontal element, and we've done a lot of really rich work in that space, that horizontal space specifically this past year, and will continue this year, which situates us for the vertical conversations. That also really leverages up some authentic opportunity for professional learning, for teachers to take time to make sure we're looking at examples of student work and really looking at those intricacies that allow them to reach that next level of proficiency and to show that they can advance in these skills. The other piece, which is something that Scott talked about earlier, is really leveraging up these PLC routines and practices. That is the space where we are really able to look at student performance, both in real time and from state level or benchmark data, identify students who are struggling, identify where that specific area of need is, and to really spend time intentionally targeting those areas. And with that said, we're passing it over to Katie.
Hello, Katie Davenport, Supervisor for Science. My portion here is short because grades 5 and 8, they had their new science PSSA based on our new STEEL standards, and the state did not report those scores because the test items are just for a pilot to see how the items perform. Starting this school year, grades 5 and 8 will take those PSSAs and they'll count. What we are anticipating is that this new science PSSA and also the Bio Keystone is going to look quite different from our current one. There's going to be a lot less focus on memorization, a lot more focus on application of skills. And so we are preparing ourselves for that new assessment and, more importantly, that new mode of instruction. Part of what we're doing We are implementing the TWIG program in grades 6 through 8 that you all approved last year, starting in 6th grade this year, and already doing some professional learning with 7th and 8th. And in grades 3, 4, and 5, we're piloting a few programs, which I hope to tell you about later this year. All of our professional learning is focused on this as well. So stay tuned. We'll have data for you next year. And I'll pass it back to Scott.
That was our PSSAs. We're going to transition into the Keystone performance. The first slide will give you an overall snapshot of how the district did. Then line under that is a comparison to the state. And what I want to draw your attention to, our students exceeded the growth standard in all 3 Keystone exams. So if you look at the bottom left, that's that color grid of the areas, the 5 areas that you can grow. In all 3 assessments, being Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology, as a district between both high schools and both high schools, this is high school only, dark blue, which is high as you can be. That's definitely a point of pride that is really exceptional. Areas to highlight from one assessment to the other, from 23-24, our black students in literature went up 14 percentage points. That would be statistical significance. Similarly, black students in Algebra 1, 18 to 35%. That was a low starting point. And there's growth there, but what we're really enthused about is that the PVOS growth, the predicted growth, is where it should be. But 17-point change, Hispanic students 20% in literature, 26% in Algebra 1, and white students 64 to 81, 17% in algebra at the high school level. So pretty big statistical significance in those specific categories. And let me turn this over to Rob to go specifically in Algebra 1.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me back. Again, as I discussed when we looked at the PSSA achievement data, it really starts with this report that comes out of eMetric, which is a holistic view of the district as a whole. And again, I'm excited by the fact that 71% of our first-time Keystone testers received or met proficiency, 37% being advanced. I'm excited to see that there's no disparity across gender, which is kind of a historical math piece that's not often discussed as much, that our special education students or students receiving special education services were 4 times higher than the rate across the state. And the same is true of our black and Hispanic students, where they were 2, 3, or 4 times higher than that of the state. Now again, that still does point to some groups that are not achieving at the same levels, but I am confident that we are making good progress and on track to where we want to be. And really that's buoyed by a report that I pulled off of PVOS. The bar graph on the left-hand side shows the percentage of students meeting or exceeding their expected growth. As Scott mentioned, our PVOS score is well above in terms of collectively as a whole. It is nice to see that all of our subgroups were more than half of our students met or exceeded their expected growth. Buoyed by our black population, where 77% of our black students met or exceeded their expected score, which is highest of any of our subgroups. And that our students receiving special education services, 73% of them met or exceeded their expected score, and there's no disparity between those, meeting or exceeding their score compared to students who do not receive special education services, which is really an outlier across the district. The reports, Scott mentioned earlier that the eMetric, some of the reports that we get from the state also shows pieces of content that we need to focus on, and I kind of wanted to highlight here. In looking at that, we have a strength in geometry, but areas that we really need to focus in terms of professional development on my end and really developing our staff and helping them with our students. Areas of data analysis, which is obviously becoming more, significantly more important as we try to tell the truth from fiction. But that's an area for, professional development that we're leading this year moving forward. The same, for functions. Data analysis tends to be the lowest across the state, which I think is a really problematic for a lot of reasons. But again, it points to an area of allowing me to know and the staff to know this is an area where we need to do better. This is, how are we teaching it across our classrooms? How do we want it taught across our classrooms and really, kind of crowdsource how we're going to grow in that area. That ultimately, though, what this data does tell us, before I talk to kind of where we're going, the school district significantly outperforms the Commonwealth related to achievement in a variety of subgroups. We can see that in that report. There's minimal growth disparity across the subgroups. You saw that with our, Black student population, 77% of them meeting their, expected growth. And what was really most exciting for me is that of the students scoring in the lowest 20th percentile across the state, 90% of those students met or exceeded their expected score, which really tells me that, the remediation, the intervention, again, that's a small number and really allows us to know those students by name. 90% of the students who are, in most need of support met or exceeded their projected score, and I think that's really exciting. In terms of where I go from here with the department, what do we do with our students? Content-specific professional development, I'm really excited to work with the staff. I've been doing that already with the secondary teachers on how we're going to teach particular pieces of content outside of kind of program, implementation. We're going to really try and make better use of our diagnostic assessments, through IXL that we're really going to tell us exactly where our students are and where we need to really focus during those interventions and supports. We're going to double down on, on our PLCs, which is a big part of the district, initiative, but the math department as a whole, and really review our summer options for acceleration and remediation so that students who do need credit recovery to move on to the next course are ready to do so in a 6 to 8 week program, and the students who are excelling through are really ready to do so and, and meet that challenge as they accelerate through content. But now I'll turn it over to Eli. Whoops, sorry.
That's okay, I wanted to hear. As Rob has laid out earlier, the presentation of the data here looks very similar. So I'll just give you a moment to explore that data. I will point out that just as Scott had shared earlier, that for the Keystone Literature exam, students for their growth measure scores were well above where they were anticipated to be. I have one more slide here. Actually, I'm going to go back and I do want to point out that 90.9% of our students were able to score proficient or advanced. So that's something I think that we can really hang our hat on in a really positive way. So again, I think in a lot of ways our areas of opportunity when we see this data actually match where our areas of focus for 4 to 8. We're looking at those opportunities of analyzing and interpreting. Those are those spaces where we're really leveraging up critical thinking that's happening in ELA. That's both in fiction and nonfiction. Both of those areas students scored very well. But when we're thinking about where are those areas of opportunity where we can start to move our scores even higher, those are the two areas where students performed, where they didn't perform as well as they did in the other two categories, which is reading for meaning. So what does this mean? What does this look like for our focus on continuous improvement? The first is we do continue to see this exceeding growth in anticipated scores. That's from the state level. Just like we talked about at the middle school level. Time spent on horizontal alignment between buildings, intentional structurings of units that are based on those PDE standards. That's the foundation where this work occurs, and that's the foundation in which we're being evaluated. Culminating summative assessments that really pinpoint those areas that we know students need to be prepared to achieve, and that really leverages up teachers to have these vertical conversations, and that's where we start to have those really rich conversations of support to make sure students are continuing to advance as they go to beyond their current grade level and into the next grade level. Just as Rob shared, really leveraging up those professional development days. Part of that includes, time to do that work I just described with that horizontal and vertical alignment, assessment creation, assessment review, but also opportunities to address professional development focus areas that will help teachers in these areas. Helps us to target next steps to make sure we're able to move forward in the ways in which we'd like to. The last piece that I really want to underline here is where we have a rich opportunity is to really emphasize that literacy is a tool for critical thinking within and beyond the text, looking for opportunities to make connections for students to make connections to themselves, to others in the wider world. That's really where, for me, reading comes alive and meaning making happens, and that's where critical thinking happens. And that's where we have an opportunity to really leverage up and give students another opportunity to continue to show their excellence here. So the data tells us we have high achievement, we have high growth. All of our subgroups are performing at or beyond those grade level expectations. And you can see that when you look at the performance or the performance of our Black student performance, but also the performance of students who are economically disadvantaged. This tells us that those interventions and supports are working. We obviously have room for improvement, and I think in the ways I laid out, we continue to chip away at that to see that improvement. So, I think when we think through what we've done this year and what's come through in the data is students are really performing and achieving at a really high level. We have some opportunities to really leverage up and help students continue to grow by pinpointing those areas to underline interpreting and analyzing literature, but that's both in fiction and nonfiction. With that said, off to Katie.
All right, again, I'll be briefer because this is our old biology keystone going out on a high note. We performed in the 99th percentile of the state. This year's biology keystone had a mix of questions on the old standards, those are the scores that we're going to see, and questions on from the new standards, which were not reported, just like the PSSAs were not reported. Our data in biology shows similar patterns as in ELA and math. We have high performance, 81.2% proficient and advanced this year, with some groups not matching the overall trend where we need to focus some more attention. I am especially excited with our new standards focusing more on skill, analysis, as a chance to reimagine our curriculum and find ways to engage all students, especially those who may not have performed as well in the past. We are proactively updating our science curriculum this year in biology. We are test driving a couple of different approaches so that we can compare results both in the classroom and on this year's standardized test. And we hope to see some great results on next year's new biology keystone. Look forward to discuss that with you next year.
Ms. Kalish, I know you went through great lengths to try to time this exactly right to make sure we have room for everything. I appreciate that, and we are right on time. I end with a slide that I started earlier with. Questions should be, what are you doing in these areas? These are going to be our big answers, and then we'll answer others specifically. But the three things we've been committing and putting a lot of time in professional development have been UDL, PLCs, and MTSS. We will continue that commitment. And as we build our capacity to do those systems better, our theory of action is we'll have students learning at a higher level all across the board. And we thank you. And that'll do it.
Thank you for that presentation. I know how much work went into it, both into putting this presentation together and the day-to-day work you and your colleagues and every teacher in all of our buildings are doing to get our kids to learn this stuff, to be prepared to take these tests. So I just wanted to give kudos where they were due. I'm going to reiterate that we're going to try and prioritize our strongest questions. We do have a little more time than I had budgeted, but that's like 5 extra minutes. So we're going to try and keep it brief. I'm going to go to the committee members first, the rest of the board, and then I'm going to open it up for community comments from the public. If somebody asks a question and one of you answers it, great. We don't need every single one of you to feel like you have to answer every single question. Abby, did you have something you wanted to add? Fantastic. How about you, Sarah?
Sorry. I just have a couple of quick questions. Regarding switching to all online for everyone, is there a plan for elementary level students to ensure that their typing skills are up to par, that that's not a barrier for them accessing and achieving on the PSSAs?
Yes, great question. This came up last year. We had some conversations with the community parent groups. We have Typing Pal and I believe Typing Without Tears. We work with our instructional technology elementary person, which is Jen Goldberg. We put expectations for 1st through 4th, that's moving in terms of a center, and we are extremely mindful of the digital diet. So those minutes progress, but pretty much stay within line for so many days a week during station time, so that when it comes to the fluency in terms of your thought and typing, they'll have a better chance, as well as their actual typing skills. So thank you for asking.
Sure. And
And I'll-
then,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to further on by saying the state does a really nice job providing tools and tutorials through their DRC system to help students kind of navigate, the ruler, the calculator, how to use the equation builder, that we make sure that our teachers kind of go through that and the students are comfortable.
Great. And then what are the current math supports that we have at the elementary level for students? The current math supports, sorry. I know
Sure.
we have the reading interventionist, but what on the math side?
Sure. So every building does have a full-time math specialist that operates, similar to the reading specialist, and they really serve two goals. One, they're a conduit for me when I need to get information out that I meet with them weekly to make sure that the teachers and the staff are aware of, things that I'm putting into play. But they also meet with students. They pull small groups of students that we identify, students who have, areas of, whether we call them unfinished learning or deficit skill set. They meet with those students after, they take a diagnostic so we can figure out where those holes are. And they work through that system. Right now, they're using iReady as kind of the platform as a diagnostic. But they meet with the handful of students that we've identified that need, extra push and support.
Great. And then one last question. Follow-up from last year. We had discussed the retesters for the Keystone exams last year during this presentation, and we talked about that for literature, that there's a Keystone Literacy Lab course that students take who are then retaking the literature Keystone exam. And we talked about the potential for there to be a math Keystone Lab course as well, and just wanted to get an update on that. Are we offering that course? Is that something that's in the works?
There are teachers who are assigned at one at Harriet and one at Lower Merion who teach what they call Keystone Lab. So students that do not make proficiency the first time around get extra support, 1 to 2 to multiple days out of their cycle to go through areas that they missed. We use the IXL diagnostic to kind of figure out where those areas are, and they're instructed that way. So they are, all the students who, as it fits into their schedule as best we can, who do not meet proficiency, and then we focus on that. It's not a standalone course necessarily to say the way it is, but it is scheduled in their schedule as Keystone Lab.
Great. Glad that we were able to add that.
Sure.
Thanks.
Perfect. Jen, did you have a question?
Two quick questions. My first one is, it's great to see improvement all across the board, but since we had improvement all across the board, to me it seems like that achievement gap is still prominent, especially with our Black students. So my question is, we mentioned tier 1 tier support when it comes to ELA, heard a little bit just now about math, but how are we tracking the work that's being done, the instruction for these students and the teachers that help these students who are falling below proficient get back on track? It's great to see the improvement over the years, but how are we tracking the students who are falling within this achievement gap, and scoring low? How are we tracking their progress every year when it comes to the Keystones and PSSAs? I would love to see how those students that are falling below, how are they tracking, how are they improving? So if we see if, tier 1, tier 2, the additional instruction, small groups and everything is having impact on their studies and education statewide.
So in terms of, this is one assessment. It's one snapshot in time. So we're way more proactive about it. So I'm going to answer, what do we do in our work every day? What do the teachers do? Down low, we have the AIMS, we have the DIBELS assessments, we have foundation tracker assessments. We also have curriculum-based assessments, which all live. We have a data warehouse that just today, Rob and I were sitting there and looking at our tiered students, and is it matching up our tier 2 sheets that we look at with literacy specialists to say, do we know these students by name and by need? How long have they been in our district? What interventions do they have? So we have systems in place to begin to look at this data and to ensure that they are getting the supports they need based on what we're seeing every day and at 3 main points along the year. We also have reading benchmarks that we provide. In third grade, we have the Study Island benchmark, and in fourth grade, we also have text-dependent analysis. So there's a multitude of data points. We just don't look at one, and we are responsive in terms of when we see something that requires attention. In Tier 1, there's push-in model with the literacy specialists. We have small group instruction model, which we're having a lot of professional learning on in the past 2 years, and now K2 is a focus of those practices, where we then go into the PLC. And why the PLC is so powerful is that's where that data comes up. When you say, okay, here's what I'm seeing in this standard area, and what evidence of learning, what artifacts of learning do I have from my classroom, from what I'm doing in my curriculum, and how can we see as a team, what can we do to improve upon that? That's the powerful piece. So it isn't just this, to your point, state assessment. We track PVAS as a predictor as well to see, are we going to see this growth? What is the expected growth? And did it come out where we thought it would be? The excitement is being in the elementary grade to see that progression and to be able to say, some did, and some went well beyond. So some of those things we are doing by being immediately responsive are having an impact. There are other variables, which I'm sure Rob will speak to too, so we can't just say it's this one thing, but we can say with confidence that is happening in the elementary in terms of when we go into Tier 2, we also have iReady diagnostic, which is adaptive, and that then gets shared with Tier 1. So we have a multitude of data to be able to provide to teachers and associated resources and programming.
So I think your point is really well taken. Sorry,
He was just.
am I jumping in?
No, I was just gonna build on your question.
Please, go ahead.
I guess, Dory, all of those are like the right inputs. I wonder if it would be possible for us to see follow-up aggregate data at this point of the year since you've had the individual student report. So for example, the nearly 150 Black students that are below basic or basic, if they've moved to Tier 2 in MTSS, which is one of my questions, can you give us an analysis of the iReady diagnostic and or mid-year reports to see if they are tracking in along the same differential as the growth data? Not in this moment, but just as a follow-up beyond the inputs, what is the impact outcome data that we could start to see more clearly and transparently just the tracking data along the way?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just, I mean, I think we all worked on the same question. Is the gap closing, and can you show us evidence of it? We know that you're targeting it, we know that you're looking at it, we know that this is a snapshot, but then we fall off a cliff after this meeting every year where we're like, what's happening next? So like showing that, and like over time too, like for me, a longer longitudinal, like how are these kids in first grade that you found below proficiency, are we seeing kind of that move out? And when are we seeing that over time? Because then we can start to say, like, look, if we're not hitting that move really strongly by 7th grade, we've got all these outcomes that are not what we want for our graduation class too. Because I think that kind of big pull out would be helpful.
Agreed. I want to get, I'm going to say thank you for the specificity, because that helps, because we use a multitude of data points, and some are used in Tier 2 and some are used in Tier 1. So right away when we look at data, if someone's using iReady, diagnostic, adaptive, it's in Tier 2. We've already looked at other data points. So with that specificity, when I pull iReady data, it is only on those students that are receiving literacy support already. So we can pull that. That has just come in the last, I've been there for 3 years. So I'll only have it for that period of time. I just want to let you know that. But we can pull that data, and we can work with Scott to get that information to you, along with the Dibbles data, if you want to see in terms of following the student as far as we can for the data that we have. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me just get my one question, and then I will go to the other members. I'm pretty quick. I just want to know what considerations go into the state's predicting of a score for a student, and if there's any consideration of how, like, it feels like if you're looking at a student that's in one of these historically underperforming subgroups, and they're doing better than they're predicted, but it's because we just predict that they're not going to do well because they're in one of these underperforming subgroups, that sort of is confirmation bias. So I'm just curious how those predictions come about.
Sure, I'll take that. So it's a question that I've heard, often. It is a mathematical calculation based on, their historical academic profile of similar students across the state over time. It is, if you did a very, deep dive into, the book on PVOS, it is a, not easily quantifiable number that I could sit here and, and pull for you the equation for it. But it is a straight mathematical calculation. It has nothing to do with, one subgroup over another. It has no idea with, they're expected to do, poorly, so they will score
So
poorly.
one's representation within a subgroup is not indicative of anything in that okay.
No, it's a mathematical calculation on that student's historical score and what students with that historical profile, typically will score in a future, on a future test.
Yeah.
And then they look at, okay, they were supposed to score a 1030, they scored a 1042. Therefore, they, exceeded that projected score.
Okay. All right.
Yep, and if we cut into the policy meeting, it's okay. I'm joking.
I was told not to. We will be done at 7:20 come hell or high water.
I'm just joking. Okay, first of all, Dory, thanks for that, and also I appreciate that any of the reports would be for the board, but also want to make sure it's useful for your work too. So if something is coming up that it feels like it's only for the board, just would love to thought partner to not just do duplicative work as well. A few questions I had is, I am wondering for the proficiency rates that are back to 2021 at some point, I can pull it too, but it might be helpful for others to see the proficiency rates prior to COVID. So is the growth actually just getting us back to where we were, or is it beyond what we were?
That's good.
Which area do you want? 'Cause it's
Either is fine, yeah,
So,
or both, yeah.
I will talk math because, as that came up and I quickly said, let me just, I know that's going to be a question when
Yeah.
we look at where we were in 2019.
Yeah.
Just at Black student performance proficiency from then. In sixth grade, we were at 27% proficient. We're now at 42. Seventh grade went from 37% proficient to 45. And eighth grade went from 17% proficient to 43% proficient for our Black students.
Okay, thank you. Dory, do you have the English stuff, or you want to come back to it? No.
Well, some of it's Drew. so-
Yeah, or Drew, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, Drew, do you want to come, we can come back. Okay, where's the timer? Okay, I heard you, Dory, mention in looking at the individual students, the transfer points, which I would just be curious as we talk about the district in aggregate, are we looking at students' data from if they have been in LMSD since kindergarten or coming in at different points? I heard you mention that, so I'd just be curious as you're analyzing data, any trends we're finding across the cohorts? I'm also wondering, are we putting all students that are below proficient into tier 2? Or that's a question?
Is it a question?
Yeah, it is.
So we have criteria for that reason. So in terms of when I'll speak for literacy and then you speak to math, very similar. We, K through the middle school, even at the high school, when we have these data points, we look to those to say, are they where they need to be in terms of grade level expectation? And we began to even start to weight certain assessments to consider what students, when we hit the 80-20% come up, what other needs do they have? So this is work that we continue to do. And yes, we do look at that, and they do receive tier 2 if the literacy criteria indicates that. That isn't done just in isolation. I just want to give some context to this work. We meet with our literacy specialists twice a month. It's even when I don't meet with them, there's extremely very detailed information and communication, and then it goes to teachers as well. So we look at this data, and it wouldn't be duplicating efforts because we pull our iReady data to look at it even more intricately. I'll give you an example, Anna, that for the first 2 columns in iReady data on that report, we know what that measures. It's a foundational skill. So that's an indicator to us. Does this student still exhibit if we're giving them just words programming? So I'm just saying, we look at it more for than the questions you're asking. We're looking at for the impact in the classroom overall. So to go to your original, yes, I mean, that would be the answer. I think for us and for Drew, what's helpful, and Rob can say this, is when you want these reports or have these questions, we're happy to put them together for you. We do look at them, and we look at them for various purposes, not such longitudinal data. We look at entry points because it will matter, because where they've been exposed to what programming. Before foundations came in, post foundations coming in. So I just wanted to make that point, because things have changed in our curriculum and our programming in a short period of time, and that's a huge variable.
Well, that's another thing I was wondering, if we could do a deep dive on the third grade. I'm actually very curious, since the implementation of the structured literacy in K through 2, if our third grade data, there's less of disparities between the subgroups as a result of that versus some of the higher grades that didn't have that. So that was one thing.
And again, to your point, if they were in the programming consistently.
Yeah.
And to piggyback on that, as we get our kids that were the first grade that went through full-day kindergarten versus the last grade that went through half-day kindergarten, if we could kind of use that as a pseudo pre-test, post-test to see if we have any effects from that.
Just to real quickly talk on the math side of the
Yeah.
house. You know, no single data point should determine whether a kid is seen. That from the, from that side, I'm looking at right now for who gets, math support and what that rubric, is for, for this year and next year. We're talking about multiple years of PSSA, ELA PSSA tells part of the story, honestly, for math. The diagnostic, whether that's IXL or iReady, curricular assessments. We tried to take a larger picture than one assessment. So I would say there's probably students who scored basic who may not be receiving tier 2 support because their other, scores are strong. And there's probably students who scored, proficient who may, from our other, assessments tell us that they need more support.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This is my opinion and perspective. I would push on you a little bit that if they are not proficient, what is the system for catching them then? And if you all are saying it's MTSS, then they should be in tier 2 because general tier 1 curriculum is not meeting their needs. And I understand there are other diagnostic points, but at the end of the day, by hook or crook, this achievement data is what drives other opportunities for students, whether we like it or not. And so just wondering how we're making those, because when you pull back the data, the proficiency in particular of our Black students isn't even meeting the state average. And so that's a problem. And so I want to celebrate what's here. And again, I'll say it again, if you pull back the data, it's really not impressive at all. It's actually atrocious when you come to some of our subgroup data. So what are we doing and how can we present what that plan is? I'm also just really curious, what's the cohort analysis across grades, not comparing third to third, but third to fourth? Where are we seeing the vertical alignment and growth across specific student cohorts in the grades versus just comparing third to third, fourth to fourth, and so on?
That's great. Okay, we have 15 minutes left, so we're gonna try and be nice and efficient. I've got 2 more folks up here, and then we'll go to the community.
2 more folks? I thought it was just me. Oh, sorry, Juanita. I was thinking we did the one side of the table, then the other. I'll try to narrow this down to like 3 questions. And 2 might be, we need to present that in a different way. One is, we talk a lot about PLCs, and I think they're really important. I think that's where you start to connect the dots between what's happening here and there. Drew, I think you talked about that, like, how do we use reading in every single classroom, not just in the English classroom? Makes total sense. When do we flip the data to look at how this data on the student level is impacting not what we're teaching, but who's teaching? So how does this fold back into teacher evaluation and teacher interventions as well? Because when you start to see, sometimes your kids are growing and, they start at a certain point, and sometimes you're having problems directly teaching one piece. We're all not good at teaching everything. There's a reason I don't teach math. So how are we looking at this data to fill in the gaps where the teachers need support to be better at what they're doing for the kids?
So I think it's a twofold question. Are you asking about how particular content is taught, or are you talking about ineffective?
I'm saying, how do you use this data to measure the effectiveness of the teacher and the interventions that you need to give to the teachers to be better at teaching?
Great question. So PVOS does score, not only do you get a score for a building, for a district, but it does do individual scores. All of us at the administration level and the building level has access to those scores to evaluate, did the students from that teacher, how did they score comparison to where they were projected to score? And we absolutely look at that metric and provide, help and support for those teachers, both in, the math specialists in the building going in, us being in classrooms, doing, specific professional development, as well as like the teacher, observation process, and then the goal setting process. That becomes incumbent upon the administration to make sure the teachers, from the data that we're getting for our teaching staff, that we're using that data and holding, teachers accountable for that data as well.
So does that?
And to be more technical,
Yeah.
there's a state formula with a pie, and if you have a 3-year rolling average, that percentage gets impacted into your overall teacher performance, which is the evaluation.
Thank you. That was the second part of that, is how you fix it and how you address it. Great. Are we looking at the data, because we have in the past, how are we seeing the data across schools? So you talked, I think, can't even remember what slide it was on, but I think it was slide like 37, between buildings and also between courses. So what is that looking like between buildings? That could be something that we look at in the future to come back to this meeting, but that's also an indicator, at least for the board and for the budgeting, is how do we support the schools that need the support in the right ways?
Definitely, Carrie, that is something that we look at when we look at resources, especially with the structured literacy, to say, are we seeing the data? Are we seeing it in one building opposed to the others? What are they doing there? What can we leverage up? Know that with every program, we have vision work and we have look-fors, we do informal walkthroughs, we have conversations, and then, for instance, with the structured literacy work, we will have the literacy specialist and Brooke Workman, who's our consultant, work with those teams or those teachers to improve upon those practices in a non-evaluative manner so that they can learn and be able to speak freely. I don't go into every single classroom because then that puts added unnecessary pressure in that moment. So we do have models in place to support that, and we are looking at the data in a way for improvement in terms of being open to learning and grow.
Great. So. And that's great in the growth, but also in a school could have a higher need. So what's the extra support that goes into that school? Because it's two-sided. Your growth could be a certain amount, but your baseline where you started is very different. And so you shouldn't be, in negative aspects because your growth matters. Okay, that's helpful on both sides of that.
I was going to add clarity because you asked about tier 2.
I'm sorry, guys, we're running really tight, and I want to make sure to get to everybody on the board. We have less than 10 minutes to go, and we haven't been able to get
we'll get there. We can, two things really quickly. One, I'd just like to look at closer in the future meeting. One, that break down those big ideas. Thank you for putting them in this presentation this year. It was an excellent ad. This presentation has gotten so much better over 4 years, and I'm really appreciative of that. But does that really marry down from where you see the gap of what kids need to achieve? So you talked about like the data, kids aren't good at the statistical data, something to that point. Are we seeing that at every level, or do we see different issues with kids that are in basic and below basic? Are we seeing the same? So I'd like to hear that in the future. Two is, I do think this is really important conversation, and it does feel like a cliff we drop off after this meeting. So what I'm charging the curriculum committee to do is don't leave this till next year. This is something we should talk about on a quarterly basis or 3 times a year, bring back, so then we won't be feeling like we're rushed and not effectively doing our jobs as board members.
We've already been talking about
Don't worry, go
doing
to
sort of a
questions.
catch-all
Great.
Towards the end of the year.
Okay, Juanita, got anything?
Fantastic. Do we have anybody from the community who would
sorry.
like to come and speak?
There was just
Come right
one
up
thing.
here when it's your time. Oh, you do have one? Come on up, you can get your, whoever's first can come on up, and we're gonna let Ms. Kerber speak first, and then it'll be your turn. When it's your turn, you have 3 minutes, you just say your first and last name, what town you're from in the district. Give me 1 second, go for it.
No, I want to piggyback on what Curry talked about in terms of teacher evaluations and teacher engagement. Talking to students, grades ranging from 7th grade to high school, that was one of the biggest issues for them, was engagement. And so when a student is not engaged and the teacher isn't building that anticipation of learning for the student, that's when learning drops off as well. So I think that's very important for the evaluations, along with student surveys. Thank you.
Great. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Julia Jeter, and I'm from Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. 2 questions. The one question is, I see you have multiracial in your things. How do you fit that? If I am multiracial, meaning Black and white, where would I fit in?
It would be how you would identify, and when you check the box of how you identify, that's what the data is pulled from.
But if I check African, Black, and white,
You would only be able to check one, and that's where the data would be pulled.
okay. My second question, I looked at the slides and everything, and I see meet above proficiency, but I don't see below proficiency. Will you be giving us that data? Because I don't see how we fall into that category.
In that same bar, I can hang out with you and show you afterwards, everything that's not on the proficiency side would equate to the other side, which would be not proficient.
Yes,
Yeah.
below yes.
Yeah, which would be
not or below.
basic or below basic would be
But
the
I didn't
categories.
see that on the slides.
Okay,
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you.
And also, and that you'll break those slides down, the ones that are not proficient, down in the categories that you have up there.
I'm sorry,
Mean
meaning,
the ethnicity groups, you would break it down, so we could see that too.
E-metric should have that on the overview.
okay,
Okay, because we didn't see it. Okay, thanks.
thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Emma Ben, and actually I'm a biostatistician by training. And
Can
a
you just say what town?
Bryn Mawr.
Bryn Mawr.
And a professor. So I was, typically, when I'm actually advising my students to make a presentation, I get the point that we're trying to present a lot of data, but you put so much there, and it's so tiny, and on top of that, there isn't sufficient time to talk about all of it. So my feeling is if we're gonna, I know, for example, even for biology, we're going through the stuff, and actually the slide for race ethnicity, the racial ethnic breakdown just got skipped because I guess maybe there wasn't enough time. I don't know what happened towards the end. But I think a suggestion would be moving forward, if you're gonna present data that you can actually talk to versus just having the slides, because we can't fully digest that. But I appreciate data, and actually am sad to see that I see there's a lot more opportunities for doing more around data analysis, because I actually think that's something that folks should really jump on, because something that's really cool about data analysis is that you find students who may even struggle with kind of the traditional math will be able to use data analysis to actually, if it's grounded in applications that are relevant to them, may actually excel. So I think there's a unique opportunity. I just wanted to also maybe reinforce something that was being said. I kept hearing, here's the data, and then, okay, well, let's look at the Black students. Look, the Black students are doing so well. But when I looked at one of the slides that was around the major proficiency gains, that slide was missing. It presented Black students for literature, Black students for algebra. It actually didn't present white students for literature. Somehow that was missing on that slide. But everyone was like, wow, look how well the Black students are doing. But actually, if you look, in 2023, 2024, for Algebra 1, they were at 18% in terms of proficient. White students were at 64%. 2024, 2025, you say, well, look, Black students moved from 18 to 35%, well, white students moved from 64 to 81%. So if you actually look at that, the gap is still the same. So either we're focusing on an equality approach, where we're making sure everybody keeps on moving forward, or we're focusing on an equity approach. And the data that I saw does not suggest an equity approach. And that's problematic. And I thank the board for pushing that. That is problematic. Also, can you remind me your name?
Sure, Robert Schwartz.
Robert. I like math folk. There was a question about how expected outcomes were calculated. And so there was a slide saying, look, this group, Black students, look, this percentage are meeting their expected outcomes. And you said, well, this is a mathematical function. It does not actually account for race. It's some function. I'd love to see the function. I'd love to see the algorithm, because so many times when we ask questions, people just tell us it's an algorithm, it's a function, and nobody can describe it. But even if it doesn't have race in the equation, if the majority of a particular group is at the bottom, and we say, well, look, they're meeting their expected outcomes, and that expected outcome for them, because they performed lower before, is lower than the expected outcome for a lot of people in a particular group that did better, then we have different outcomes for different groups. And we can say that it's, well, individual, but you're presenting it in aggregate. And you're also presenting the fact that the majority of a particular group, almost 50% of Black students, are not really doing well. So one issue I have is, don't give me that, look, they're meeting what's expected if the expectations are lower. And I'd love to know, is the expectation the same for everyone? They're expecting everyone to improve by 1.2 standard deviations? I mean, I'd love for you to present. It's not sufficient to me to tell people that it's a mathematical function and that's sufficient. Because if folk are performing lower, what is expected of them is going to be lower, and to tell me, well, let's celebrate because they're meeting what is expected of them is not sufficient. We should not be happy with folk performing at the point at which is expected of them if that expectation, we know, is not going to get them to where they need to get to so that they can actually thrive in society. So I appreciate presenting all of this information. I agree it would be nice to have an opportunity to really break these things down, but if you're going to put things on slides, don't put it on the slide if we don't have time to talk about it, so that we can actually dig deeper. Otherwise, you can't digest this. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that feedback. I will say that some of the consideration, I note, because we've been having conversations on it, some of the consideration of including some of those is because a lot of folks will go through and download the presentation after, and so it allows the administration to present more data than necessarily we would be going through line by line in the presentation. I absolutely take your point that that can be presented in a different way, and maybe that's absolutely something we can think about and consider going forward. I really appreciate everyone's feedback. We are 100% at time. I know we have some online comments. Those will be saved and shared with the full board, and anybody who was not able to speak tonight that wants to share some more, with us can go ahead and email communitycomments@lmsd.org. If you wanted to go ahead and put CCOB 712, oh my God, my brain is in July already, 112, and that will let us be able to just sort of accumulate everything together, and so that the whole team can have access to all of those questions. If you are watching this online on the stream or the webinar, you can just stay put and for policy, which is going to start in 7.5 minutes. And I appreciate everyone's time, and we will see you next month. We are adjourned.